everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and I like to talk about books, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books of 2020. If you've been keeping up with my videos this week, you'll have already seen a couple other videos I've posted that are wrapping up my year in reading. So I've posted a video where I tier ranked every single book I read this year, a video where I talk about my least favorite books of the year, and a video where I talk about my most disappointing books of the year. But this is the one I am the most excited to talk about because I get to tell you about all of my favorite books. I have actually narrowed the list down to 10 books that really stood out for me this year, but what I was not able to do was actually rank them on a scale from position 1 to 10. So they're not going to be in a particular ranking order. I really love all these books so much. They all did something for me this year and I cannot recommend them enough. So with that being said, let's just jump on in. I did think it would be nice to categorize them by genre or the just general vibes of the book because some of them aren't super specific genres. So I'll start with my favorite nonfiction books that I read this year. First, I have Untamed by Glennon Doyle. This is a memoir that I actually listened to on audiobook, but I liked it so much that I needed to get a physical copy. Plus the cover is just absolutely gorgeous, so how could you not want this on your shelves? I did not know anything about Glennon Doyle or her story before. I just saw this book being talked about a lot because it was one of Reese Witherspoon's book club picks, and so those are typically pretty popular. It was at the top of the charts when it first came out, and so I wanted to give it a shot. I also just love memoirs in general, so I'll pretty much read any memoir, really. But this book blew me away. So if you don't know anything about Glennon Doyle's story, she was once married to a man and had several kids with this man and was living her life the way she thought she should be living it. And then she met this woman, Abby Wambach, the soccer player, and decided to abandon everything that she thought she knew about the way she was living. She realized she had feelings for this woman, and now they're happily married. Glennon Doyle has a couple other memoirs, at least one other called Love Warrior. I haven't read any other books from Glennon Doyle. This is the only one I've read. But this one tells the story of her meeting Abby and coming to terms with what that meant and trying to figure out her emotions, and just some commentary about how she raises her kids and lots of general stuff from those years in her life. The reason I liked this book so much was because as I was listening to it on audiobook, I was in like the halfway point. I had been listening to it for a while and I caught myself getting annoyed with the tone of the book. Glennon Doyle also narrates the book, so you really feel like you're listening to her tell her story rather than just like a memoir. I don't know, it makes it more personal when she's actually telling her own story. And then I caught myself at moments thinking, why does she think she knows it all? Why does she think she has it all figured out about the world? Who is she to be spewing all these things? And like, she's just too confident and she's just voicing her opinion too much. And then as I continued reading the book, I had to stop and think, because the entire message of this book is how we have all these perceptions of how women should be and how women should live their lives and how women should be more feeble and quiet and shouldn't be these confident, outspoken people. And so I really think this book is just so incredible because it resonated with me so much. Like the way Glennon Doyle told her story and the way she explained the problems with how women are perceived in this world really just hit me and made me stop and think as I was getting annoyed with her for being so confident and being so sure of herself. And then hearing her say how that shouldn't be a problem, but it is because of how our society has shaped women. I was just mind blown. It changed my perspective so much. It changed the way I live my life and voice my opinions and my confidence and myself and the way I look at other women. I really just think this was a transformational book that really just changed my life. I don't know if it'll be like that for everyone. I don't read a ton of nonfiction feminist literature, so if you do read a lot of that, maybe this would be like old news for you. But because I don't read stuff like that a lot, this just like really blew my mind and was exactly what I needed. So I really love this book. I really love Glennon Doyle. I think she's so great. I love her relationship with Abby and her whole family and how they all work together, and I just think they're so great. And the other nonfiction book I have is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I cannot verbally express my absolute adoration and love for this book. If I had to tell everyone you can only read one book, I really just feel like this would be the book that I would recommend for a lot of people because it is that good. So this is also a memoir style work. And in this story, it's a little bit tricky to explain, but in this story, Carmen Maria Machado is talking about her time in an abusive relationship with another woman, what that was like to be in that relationship and ending that relationship and living with the trauma from being in that relationship after it ended. But it's not just a straightforward narrative. It is told in different vignettes that are all in a different style of a sort of trope in literature or even film. It's just so transformational. It's such an incredible book. So the only way I can really explain it is to just show you a couple examples. And it took me a while to understand as I was first reading the book as well, because she explains what it means to her when she defines the dream house and how the dream house is like their relationship in general to her, and just how places and memories are tied. It is so hard to explain the way she does. But with each section, it'll start with a title. So this one is Dream House as Not a Metaphor, Dream House as Perpetual Motion Machine, Dream House as an Exercise in Point of View, Dream House as Inciting Incident, Dream House as Time Travel, Dream House as Stranger Comes to Town, etc. You might be getting the point by now. And each of those framing devices are used to talk about a point in time in that relationship. First of all, let's just talk about how incredible and brilliant that is in itself as a device for writing a memoir. Second of all, let's talk about how interesting it is to think about how she used this form as a distancing mechanism as she is writing about such a very heavy, hard time in her life. Amazing. I just could go on and on and on and on and on forever about this book and how beautifully written it was and how hard-hitting it was. I just love it so, so much. So if you have not yet read this book, I don't know what you're doing. You should probably go read this book. Next, I'll talk about a couple thrillers that I have on my favorites list, and the first one is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. If you've been watching my channel for a while, this is probably no surprise to you at all. I talk about this book a lot. I recommend this book a lot. It is truly one of my favorite thriller/mysteries. It's more of a mystery that I've ever read in my life because it is so unique and fun and fast-paced, and I really love the atmosphere of this book, and it really just takes you on a ride. So this is a story where there is this party taking place. During the evening of this party, Evelyn Hardcastle, one of the characters, dies. You don't know who killed her or why. The protagonist of this story is someone named Aidan Bishop. The way they are set to solve the mystery of who killed Evelyn Hardcastle and why is that every day Aidan wakes up, the day keeps repeating itself over and over and over again from the start, except Aidan is jumping around, living life in the bodies of different guests at the party. So he has different perspectives, whether it's people who are related to Evelyn Hardcastle, people who like her, people who don't like her. He gets to live in the lives of those bodies and people throughout the whole day, every day, to try to close in on who killed Evelyn Hardcastle and why. And it is just truly brilliant. It's executed so well. It has the potential to be extremely confusing, but it's super easy to follow along. I have recommended this book to so many people, and then they read it and they love it too. So I always just highly, highly recommend this book. It's a really fun time, and it is also being adapted into a Netflix show. And then the second thriller I have that is more of a thriller, less of a mystery, is No Exit by Taylor Adams. I have heard so many good things about this book, and I've had it on my shelf for a long time, and I've just put it off and put it off and put it off, and I wish I hadn't, because it is truly one of those books that has been hyped so much, but it met every single expectation I had and more. This book was truly that exciting, that good, that fun, that interesting. It was everything. This is a story about a young woman who is on her way home from college. There's a blizzard coming in, it's late at night, she's been driving, and so she stops at this rest stop. And when she stops, there are a couple other people already at the rest stop, so they end up getting stuck here, snowed in, they can't be on the roads. And then as she's walking around outside, she sees what she believes is a child in a van. And then she has to figure out, was that a child in the van? If so, whose van is this? Why is there a child in there? Did someone take a child? Am I in danger? And it just all spirals from there as she has to try to figure out what the heck is going on and how she's gonna get out of this situation. And it was so exhilarating. So fast paced, so fun. One of the most fun thrillers I've ever read. You cannot stop turning the pages. I read this all in one day. I just couldn't put it down. It was truly just such a great time. Next up, I have two books that really surprised me that they ended up being on my favorites list because they're from two genres that I don't really read much from, and that is a romance and a fantasy. So I'll start with the romance, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I saw this book talked about so much last year. It was like the #1 romance book of 2019. I just dismissed it. I thought there's absolutely no way I'm going to enjoy a romance book, period, but especially not one that has this cheesy pink cover and these illustrated characters on the front and this cheesy little title of Red, White, and Royal Blue. Like, there's no way. Definitely not for me. I was so very wrong. I love this book so much. This is the book that got me back into romance books this year. I don't even remember why I picked it up. I think I ended up reading it for the Queer Lit Readathon, which sounds about right because I remember I read this early in the year and that was in March. But I just went out on a limb and gave this book a chance, and it became one of my all-time favorite books. This is a romance story about two characters, a guy named Alex, who is the president's son, and then a guy named Henry, who is a prince in England. It is an enemies to lovers romance, which is my absolute favorite trope. So they start as hating each other. They've never been able to get along. They have to see each other at functions sometimes, and they just don't vibe. But they have this incident happen at this party where I think they like topple over a cake or something, and then it turns into quite the media scandal, and the tabloids start putting out these stories of this disaster and how they hate each other, and basically it just looks really bad for both of their families. Their families are like, that's not cool. You guys need to establish a friendship for the media to resolve this whole issue and fix the press. So then they start a fake friendship that, as I'm sure you can assume, turns into a real romance, and it was so cute. So cute. I love the banter in this book. I love the text messages and the emails they exchange. This book made me feel like you feel when you're falling in love for the first time with someone. I just was on that journey with them. I adored them so much. This is like my favorite couple I've ever read. This is definitely my favorite romance book I've ever read. And I also just love the representation in this book and just the vision of America that is pictured in this book. It is just truly such a great escapist romance. It's a great time and I highly recommend it. Even if you don't usually like romance, maybe give this one a try because it really changed my mind about the romance genre. And then the fantasy book that I have is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This was truly a surprise because I've already read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern and I really did not like that book. I just didn't feel like I connected with it. It just wasn't for me. So I didn't think there was going to be any chance of me really liking The Night Circus. This book changed my mind about fantasy. This book is what made me start picking up more fantasy books this year, similar to how Red, White, and Royal Blue made me start picking up romances. This was just the reason I started picking up more fantasy books. This is a story about a traveling circus that comes out at night, and you never really know where it's gonna show up or when it's gonna show up or how long it's gonna show up, but people love it when it's there. It has these amazing exhibits, all these tents. It's just a really magical atmosphere that is developed in this book by describing how this circus is laid out. And the story is essentially about these two main characters, this man and this woman, who have been pitted against each other in this competition to be the best like magician, but they don't start knowing who they're pitted up against. And this book honestly wasn't exactly what I expected based off of reading the synopsis. I thought it was going to be more of like dueling and intense competition and that kind of like game atmosphere, but it was much more subdued. I don't think everyone's gonna like this book. It's very slow paced, it's very dense, but it's written so beautifully. It's so lyrical. The atmosphere is amazing. It's just one of the best books I've ever read and I love it so much. I also listened to part of it on audiobook as well as reading the physical copy, and the narrator on the audiobook is just such a cozy voice. This book is just the ultimate cozy vibe for me. It is just so great and I see myself reading this many more times in my life. So I have 4 books left and they don't really fall under a particular genre. These are just more contemporary, literary, a little fantasy, a little fabulism, just kind of a mesh of what I like in books that is this weird not defined genre. So I'll start with Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. I think I would call this a young adult contemporary book. That is what it is mostly at its core, but there are also ghosts. So I haven't personally read anything by Nina LaCour. I just saw this book come out this year. I heard about the ghosts and I was interested in it, and I'm really, really glad I read this book because now I definitely want to read other stuff from Nina LaCour. It was just so good. This is a story about a girl named Mila who has just aged out of the foster care system, and so she is invited to go live on this farm. On this farm, she gets to live there and work there, and just gives her something to do with her life. And once she gets there, there are some ghosts there and some weird things going on, and she just sort of has to piece it all together as she is also coping with trauma and grief. And I really don't need to tell you too much more about it because it is a fairly short book and it is a fairly simple explanation of what starts the story, but what ended up happening is really complex and really beautiful, and it is written so lyrically, and I just really love the little bit of weirdness and whimsy in this story. It's written in a way that is sort of similar to what I usually describe as despair in books or dread in books that I don't like, but this one is a more lighthearted sadness. It's like written in a more somber tone, and that I really, really enjoyed. I really enjoyed Mila as a character, and a lot of the other characters in this book. Really, really loved the ghosts. They just see these ghosts dancing in the field, and she'll be walking by and they're like, yeah, those are just the ghosts, and she's like, you just have ghosts dancing in your field? I don't understand. So I just thought this was truly such a great, great book. I really enjoyed being on Mila's journey with her, and I would highly recommend this one. Next up, I have Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. In this story, there are two women who were friends when they went to boarding school together, but they've sort of disconnected. They haven't talked a lot until one day one of them gets a letter from the other one that is asking her to come help her because she has to raise her stepkids. So she ends up going. She's like low on money. She doesn't have a lot going on for her. She's like, I guess I'll go see what my old friend needs from me. And when she gets there, she discovers that there is a weird thing going on with these kids, and that is when they get angry, they combust into flames, literally. So this cover is quite literal, not metaphorical in its art style. The reason I love this book so much is a story I find myself being drawn to a lot in books and film, where there are just these kids who are misunderstood and are outcast from society and just need someone to care for them and help them and love them. And when the person who is caring for them also has their own set of problems that they're dealing with, and they really just like mutually support each other and learn and grow. And I just find that to be such a wholesome story. But I also just really love the way this book was written. There was just something about the tone that was really witty and sarcastic, and I just thought it was really, really fun. I heard a lot of people talk about this book last year, but I haven't really heard much about it anymore. It kind of died out, but I think it's really, really great and deserves a lot of the hype that it got. So I would highly recommend checking this one out if it has fallen on your list. Next up, we have Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemor. This is another book I read really early in this year, and I have not stopped talking about it since. I recommend this to nearly everyone, and everyone I recommend it to really, really enjoys it. This is a story about a woman named Una who ends up living her life out of order. On her 19th birthday at midnight, instead of turning 19, she turns like 54 or something. And then the next year she turns like 25. And then the next year she's like 43, and then 36, and then 22, and just lives her entire life not in sequential order. I adore books that play with time in this way and that take you on this journey with this character as they're learning life lessons by being put through life in a way that is not usual to how we actually do in real life. I also just really enjoyed Una as a character. I also enjoyed all the things that happened to Una and just watching her go through life, and it was so emotional and moving and fun and funny and just all around a really great book. And then last but not least, The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This book definitely has made it to my all-time favorites list. It is another book that just hits on everything I love in books. It's sort of similar to Nothing to See Here, how it is about a group of kids who are outcast and misunderstood, and an adult who comes in and also has their own problems, and then they all learn and grow together. So like I said, that's a really common trope that you'll see me liking a lot in books and movies, but it's just my thing. It's just what I like. I just love seeing that in books. This book told that story in such a beautiful beautiful way. It is so interesting. So this is about a group of kids who are all orphans and they are magical youth. So there's a character named Lucy, which is short for Lucifer. That's correct, he's the Antichrist. There are characters that are fairies or gnomes. And so all of those magical aspects were just really, really fun. It also has a beautiful atmosphere because they're sent to live in this house that is literally on a landscape like this, where they live right at the edge of the ocean, and they're really, really far away from everyone else on this island. One of the people that lives with them is like this fairy who helps them out and like guards the island. And then the person who runs this place, Arthur Parnassus, is just a dream of a man. He's great, we love him. And so the way this story kicks off is that a person from the department that is in charge of monitoring magical youth gets sent to this orphanage to get a take on things, take some notes, see if it is a good place or if there are problems going on there, because these kids are supposed to be the most dangerous magical youth that are out there. And so they really want to get good notes on what's going on in this house and basically decide if they should shut it down. When our main character Linus goes to this house, he is skeptical. He's expecting them to all be awful. He doesn't really love his job. He doesn't really love his life. And he goes in with this perception of what these kids are going to be. And then he spends time with them. He gets to know them. He gets to understand them. He gets to see how society sees them and how that affects their lives. And he also falls in love with the guy who runs this house. So it's a perfect book. You cannot convince me otherwise. This is just a 10 out of 10. Nothing could be so good. TJ Klune has a new book coming out next year called Under the Whispering Door, I think is what it's called. And I read the synopsis for that and I'm so freaking excited for that because that sounds like it'll also be a new favorite. So I am just obsessed with this. If you know of any books that are similar to this, let me know, because I could read stuff like this all day long, every day. So that is it. These are all of my top 10 books of the year out of the 130 plus that I read this year. These were just the ones that stood out the most. It wasn't even that hard to narrow it down to the top 10 because I just love all of these books so much in their own way. They all did something different for me, and they're all books I can see myself reading again and again and again over the years. If you haven't read any of these books, I would highly recommend you check them out because I really, really love them so much. They're so close to my heart. And a lot of them, I think, have a really broad audience, so a lot of different types of readers can enjoy them as well. Also, make sure you comment and let me know what your favorite book or books of 2020 were, if you can't just limit it down to one, because I definitely want to check out all of you guys' favorites as well. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!